I don't understand, because they can grow under any place in the township. Any
Under
place.
business?
Absolutely. In fact.
What will happen to my taxes if I go from?
No, that's not true.
What are you
With
doing?
the existing zoning laws, you
No.
can.
No.
But with the new laws that you're proposing,
Identify yourself.
Wait, Jim, if you let me just finish. What will happen to my taxes if I go from agricultural, and I have 13 acres of property, and it is just so coincidental that my property is the very last property to be considered changed. I am agricultural right now. Mr. Glass borders me. Mr. Glass would remain agricultural. I would go to business. What does that do to my taxes?
You know what, you're not changing the use of your property. It's still
What
being-
does that do to my
I don't think it
taxes?
does anything to your taxes. I don't know where.
Can you guarantee that?
Of course not.
And finally, if this is, I appreciate the amount of work that goes into this, because I sat on the board when we did the comprehensive plan with Jeff Pierce. We took into consideration slope of hills, widths of sidewalks. We even did not allow a 5-way interchange in our, thought of just about everything you could think of.
There was a gentleman up here first. Go ahead, sir.
Jim Watson on Bigger Road. I had no idea what any of these zoning laws were. I went on the internet and I read the 160-some pages that are on the internet of the existing laws. And as it was, about 75 to 80% of Robinson Township was zoned rural residence, agricultural. 75 to 80% it was. All areas were allowed to apply for gas and oil permits in all areas of the township except the floodplains area down at the southern tip of the township. With the new proposal that you have that I've read, the only areas that will allow for the oil and gas, natural gas permits to be applied for would be the agricultural and the industrial. The industrial being out on I-80 and the agricultural, some of the farmlands. So what Judy's saying, the other areas that were rural residential before, there's not going to be any permits applied for, or allowed to be applied for in those areas. And I'd like to go further and say that when I read the description of the RA Residential Agricultural District, it sounded great. It was established to provide sites for low-density residential use, together with agricultural activities and such public and semi-public uses and facilities as may appropriately be located in the district. The district is intended to provide for the long-term, low-density growth that the fellow talked about over here, and throughout the establishment of appropriate standards to maintain the desirable residential qualities commensurate with a predominantly low-density family ordinance. All that sounds great. You've changed my Bigger Road area, which is in dark green, at the northern tip of the township. You changed us to a special conservation district. And the terminology you used to describe that was a district with a high concentration of floodplains, wetlands, steep cliffs, and environmental hazards. I am so offended by that description of this new area that you've zoned my area. If I ever tried to sell my house and somebody read that description, they would think they're either going to fall over a cliff, get flooded out, or get cancer. I would never sell it. My welfare. You ruined that. You would be ruined in that section of our township. And that's the section I can speak for. That's where I live.
I think Mr. Grossman.
Yeah, I'm starting to like the words. Actually, I thought that was the most beautiful part of the township.
It is a gorgeous area.
It's beautiful.
You drive out there in the fall, when the leaves are changing and the snow's on the trees, it's beautiful.
I actually was. I think that's the most beautiful part of the township. I'm sorry that's kind of planner words for saying that though that land is beautiful, it can't support a lot of intensive residential development.
I could find areas that are a lot
Well,
worse
no,
than that.
I understand. It means you can't. It doesn't mean you can't build a house there. What it means is that's not an area where you'd want to see 5,000 houses.
Who would want to build there? You're gonna get cancer or fall over a cliff.
Well, environmental hazard doesn't mean toxic. It just, in planner jargon, it means areas that
It means I'm gonna get cancer.
no. No, I'm really sorry you don't like that wording.
No, I hate that.
Okay.
Mr. Campbell.
Yeah, John Campbell, 738 Campbell Road, Baltimore, Pennsylvania. I think everything that's being talked about here, I can clarify it. There's a lot of people in the room here too. I just wanted to make a few comments. It has been past practice many times by this current Board of Supervisors to react on minority requests. Most recently, a few residents, maybe 5, 10, 15, had concerns about the compressor station in Smith Township. At the April 2013 meeting, you supervisors asked Mr. Smith to look into a meeting with DEP. Mr. Smith attended the meeting in Slovan protesting against the compressor station.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
I am happy to let you do that at the supervisors meeting, but this hearing is supposed to be for the zoning.
I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna get
Please
there.
get to it.
I'm gonna get there. Represent Robinson Township, again, the minority. At that time, the majority of the Robinson Township submitted a petition of over 250 names in support of that compressor station. Again, the majority is speaking loud and clear, as we did in the election process, for the new, fresh leadership in Robinson Township to bring the township back to the residents and not be a township run by a dictatorship of all yes men with hidden agendas and no regard for the majority of the residents and the future growth of the property in Robinson Township. And again, the majority is speaking, as we have petitions here signed by residents here, residents that are not here. 253 residents right now demanding that this board does not adopt or change any ordinances, amendments, zoning maps for Robinson Township while you're in a lame duck session. We also want this posted to the record. Now, my question to the board, are you going to support this request of all these people in this township that don't want any changes made and being demanded by the residents of this township? Are you going to support this?
How many signatures do you have?
I have 253 right now.
So you get about 13% of the township.
That's correct. And if we'd have had more time, we could have had more. We could have more.
I understand everybody's concern, why they come. They don't want change on the zoning, the gas drilling. But, you know, when you talk about majority and minority, you came with 13% of the township signatures. If this was a process that was started 6 months ago, I agree with you. I would do nothing, allow the new supervisors to come in, do what they had to do. I'm talking years. The previous board, the planning commission, had nothing to do with this. These things were started years ago.
But why now?
Years.
Why do it now?
Because they finished the comprehensive plan almost 2 years ago. The zoning ordinance was ready before the election. It had to go through the lawyers, it had to go to the law library. There's a process that had nothing to do with some election. Nothing. I agree with Mr. Coleman that if he wants something changed, there's no reason that the supervisors coming in won't do that. Imperial Land has sent us a letter where they would like some changes. I agree with those changes.
Just as Greg said, why wasn't there communication?
There's been communication. Nobody comes to the meetings. There's 3 people at the meeting when we did the comprehensive plan. Advertised in the newspaper.
Can't the township send out a letter to the people, the residents with land on it?
That's exactly why we started the website.
But that was now.
Watch the
That was
meetings.
4 months ago.
The planning commission meeting is posted all the time, nobody comes.
That comprehensive plan was advertised, posted exactly the same way that this zoning ordinance was done. That was done 2 years ago, and nobody came to that meeting.
So my question is, are you gonna vote on this, or are you gonna table it and get out of your session and not make any changes?
The board's gonna continue with the hearings. After the hearings, the board will decide what we're doing.
And Mr. Campbell, you said you wanted to mark something for the record. Do you have
an exhibit or something?
Yes, I have the, matter of fact, I have the petitions here.
It's up to you, you can do that later.
I'll do it later, but it'll take up time.
Donna
Go ahead.
Valentino, Robinson Road. I see that my zoning really hasn't changed, but it looks to me like the only place where range resources can drill is so far away from my leased property that I would stand a prayer of getting included in a unit. Is there some provision in there that they can get an exception on the residential agricultural lands?
There is no exclusion, we're gonna do that during the drilling here, but there's no exclusion whatsoever for drilling in the township. What we did is we identified all the areas that they've asked to drill in the past. We included them in the overlay district. But we also made sure that if anybody needed to drill in any other areas, the zoning hearing board could simply grant that to the drilling company. So there's nothing exclusionary, nothing. What we did is everywhere they ran a pipe along the pipelines where they have asked to drill in the past, existing drilling areas, we included that in the overlay districts. And we had a map done, I'm going to pass this around, of the coverage of the drilling from the existing overlay district. This is the coverage of the township. We made sure we covered the entire township 100%. And that does not figure in any well pads that are located in the adjoining townships. But there's nothing exclusionary. In fact, is there somebody here from Imperial Land tonight? I discussed Mr. Temple.
Yeah, I'm going to speak.
Okay, when he speaks, we're going to go over some of the things that they addressed in the letter that they sent to the township. And when we talk about the drilling, the locations, we're going to cover all of them. If they need to go somewhere else, if they have plans to put a well pad, say, on your property, there's no reason that they can't do that. What I will tell you is this, a board of supervisors cannot, we could not do that as a board. Only the zoning hearing board could do that. And that's exactly why we set the system up the way we did. So if they go in and say, we cannot reach a certain parcel of property from that overlay district, the zoning hearing board can grant them permission to go somewhere else. That's the way the system's set up. And that's exactly why we did it the way we did it. The board can't do that. Does that answer the question? Anywhere they need to go, the zoning hearing board can grant that.
And I know there's probably a lot of oil and gas questions. Can we close this particular hearing? Is there any questions about the map, and then we can open up the oil and gas one?
Thank you, Sean Kramer, Robinson Church Road. With all due respect, the question was asked of Mr. Polis. I'm going to ask Mr. Rhodes to see if he knows it. And that is, if our zoning is changed from agriculture to business, will our taxes go up? Did you read the form? Are you even aware of what these colors on this map?
Answer if your taxes will go up.
Pardon me?
I cannot answer if your taxes will go up.
Why not? Aren't you guys supposed to be stewards of us? No, stop, don't interrupt me, please. There is a question on the floor here. Are our taxes going to go up if our zoning is changed? That's a simple question that everyone would want to know here. Wouldn't you look out for the best interest of the people here, rather than the best interest of the free people?
Well, let me answer that by telling you what happened to me. My wife and I lived in Finley Township. We lived in a residential area. When they expanded the highway, we got changed to business park. Our taxes did not go up, nothing changed. We stayed in the house, kids were born there. Nothing changed until we wanted it to change. When we moved out here into Robinson Township, that area became developed as a business park. But I can't answer a question like that. The only thing I can tell you is that this happens every day. When the highways come through, you can't sit. It happened to us. It happens to everyone. Nothing changed for us until we wanted it to change.
Okay. Since we can't answer this question, and since there are so many other questions by people around here, why do we have to vote on this tonight? Can't this be tabled or wait until January and let the new supervisors vote on this?
If they want to start the process over and include it, they can change it.
Why wait?
that is something when the board ultimately votes, they'll either vote yes, no, table. That's one of the options that the board has. So they really don't answer in a public hearing how they will vote, but that is something that they could reach a consensus on. That's something that you can.
All right, I'm gonna punch some more holes.
Before you go on, one more
thing.
Well, no, your previous question.
Yes.
Typically, the county sets the reassessments, not the municipality. Typically, when you rezone parcels, you don't see an automatic increase or decrease in some taxes because it's based on your use of that parcel. So if you go from residential to commercial and you're still an open field, your tax pretty much is an open field until the county would come in and reassess. Typically, they're only going to reassess based on the use you place to the property. So could your future use be more valuable and have a higher tax consequence? Yes. Could it be less? Yes. I mean, that's my understanding.
I don't, how old is, well, let me ask a question first, and anybody who wants to jump in. Does anyone know the last time Washington County did a reassessment?
I was just reassessed a couple days ago, thanks to somebody who turned me in. Said I was doing something that I shouldn't have been doing. After 3 trips up to the county, we got it all straightened out. But I was the only person in the entire part of Robinson Township to get a personal reassessment.
What's your name?
I'm talking about a county-wide when
Sir, your name for the court?
Boyd Duran, 511 Campbell Road.
Thank you.
Let me finish. I just wanted to ask you, are you a geologist?
No, geographer, actually.
Okay, so to say that certain parts of the township, you can use the dirt's bad for certain things and stuff like that, necessarily doesn't hold water, no pun intended, all right? And no disrespect, please, but to see the people here and see this, you know, this isn't right. So I'm asking Mr. Brozitz to make a motion to table.
We're in the middle of a hearing, we don't vote in here. So there's no motions to be made in here. Other than to close it or continue, that's the only thing we can do in here.
Will you entertain? Table the?
Well, according to some people in this room, I should ask Mr. Kapolik because it's been declared that it's a dictatorship. So, just so you know,
It is.
I make my own mind. I make my own decisions, and the answer to your question is no. I want the hearing to complete.
The best thing, you know, you said 13% of the people, 200 votes. Well, I think this is the majority of the people whose property and stuff like that are going to be affected. I don't think the people in town are actually going to care what happens if the gas goes up where we are. Am I
Okay,
correct?
before we, Mr. Yeah, you had your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yes, Brian Temple, Imperial Land Corporation. Just one technical question. You had entered into the record, the letter I drafted.
People are talking up here.
The letter from October 25th. Did you enter it with the exhibits that we attached to it?
Yes.
Just want to verify. Okay.
Yes.
You know, just to summarize, you know, the interchange business district on our property, pretty much between here and Quicksilver, I mean, that is our plan for that property when the highway goes through. So, thank you for that. And then the other comments I can go over in the oil and gas section.
Could you show, kind of give us an idea of where the property that you have comes across the border?
The border with Finley?
Yeah, the border with Finley, all the way down to Route 22.
I mean, we own this piece, this piece, this piece. This is 980, we own pretty much this whole area. It's about 2,400 yards.
As far as development coming into Robinson Township, could you give everybody an idea of what you've done in Finley and what you need from the zoning to do kind of the same?
The development at the Westport intersection of 576 and Finley Connector is our development. You know, we have probably 450,000 square foot under roof, another 450,000 square foot being built right now. We have the same type of plans stored here. Now, some of my comments did address the PRD, the R1, and some of the residential here. You know, our development's going to occur right at the interchange. So we would prefer some of this area to be zoned, interchange development, because that's where we're going to start.
Would a developer come into a township and spend money to do any type of commercial development if they didn't have the protection of zoning?
I mean, we are all for the zoning in this area, because currently, and I know we had meetings, 4 or 5 years ago, and currently, based on the current zoning, we can't do anything with the residential.
Is Mr. Butler here?
He is not.
I had talked to him about 5 years ago, and that's kind of what he shared with me, is that when that turnpike comes through, that area's going to have to be some sort of a business park zoning to do any type of development.
Yeah, and in fact, when the Midway McDonald Sewer Authority was created, I mean, we paid personal money to up the size of the line along Nobletown to service, the area between here and this, for commercial development. I just wanted to verify that those exhibits were included.
I'll double check, Brian, but I think they're in there.
I'm Mr. Waller, 1735 Bigger Road. In response to your thing about you've had planning commission meetings and everything, when you ran for supervisor initially, you sent out a letter to every one of the residents. Recently, you sent out a letter to every one of the residents. Why could you not send out letters to the residents to let the residents know that this was going on? Okay, you never addressed that. You were able to send letters out for your election process. And also, when you decided to brag how much money was in the coffers of Robinson Township, that's money that you had, you bragged about that. But this zoning thing, which is very important to these little people, not Major Imperial Land Company, who has not been a good bid partner with Robinson Township. He has destroyed Robinson Township. I personally was on a board that fought Imperial Land Company on Ridge Road when they wanted to put an acid dump in again, okay? And it cost Mark Ado $5 million, and we had defeated him. But then he already had the liner going in, and he begged us to turn around on it. You were around here when that was going on, okay? Where we live, on Ridge Road, you took that area and you took preservation, you changed it around, and you moved it up on the bigger road. And in 2004, Hurricane Ivan, which was one of the worst water disasters, flood disasters in western Pennsylvania's history, Bigger Road never had a problem. We never had a problem with the soil. We never had a problem with flooding there. It was Crick Road, which was the preservation area, which was expected. We have 3 streams on Bigger Road, and every one of them streams, they were overflowing a little bit, but people were still making passage on them roads with no problem. And we objecting out there in our little area, rural area out there, that what you're taking our rural residential away and making us a special preservation. And it will affect us as landowners. I agree with Mr. Watson when he said that if somebody decides I'm going to sell my property and somebody looks at that zoning, they're going to want to live there. As he said, they're looking at that, even though he said we don't like the terms, that terminology makes our property value less. And that's great for tax purposes, but we don't care about tax purposes. We're looking into the future that if our children or our grandchildren want to have that property and sell that property, they're going to get raped over the coals because they're going to have problems selling that property. And as far as the gas company people go, they built a dew plant out there in Sunny Hill. And your watch, and you let it happen. And normal gas drilling would come out there, put their pipes in, do their drilling, put their lines in, and they would leave the area. And occasionally trucks would be taking stuff out. And we went through that with Atlas. And that was fine. But all of a sudden a dew plant went out there. Now it's a permanent installation out there. That was on your watch. So if you're so concerned about the safety and welfare of the residents of Robinson Township, then why don't you be more alert and more aware? Because from my understanding, this board, these supervisors weren't part of it at that time, stated that, oh, we weren't aware they were building that out there. Well, come on. Be aware of your job. Also, as a supervisor, you took an oath to protect and look out for the welfare of the citizens of Robinson Township. You have been against that oath because you are not notifying these people of what is going on in this township, and all you're saying is, well, we advertise at planning commission meetings. Yeah, I've been to meetings. I used to live at these meetings. I went to all these meetings for years and years with Jerry Runnis, because you are a Jerry Runnis. Okay? Jerry Runnis ruled this township with an iron fist in his way because he was in bed with Imperial Land Company. And it was sad. Okay? I became a Robinson Township police officer because...
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. You're getting so
But I just want to let you know, you have means to notify these residents. You have never talked to the little residents out in Bigger Road. Because people come around and say, we never heard about this. We never seen anything about
Mr.
this.
Walters, how did you all find out about this?
Because our neighbors came around and told us.
That's right. And when I talked to neighbors, and when I talked to people 2 years ago, nobody was interested. Nobody says a word. Nobody comes to the meeting for the comprehensive plan. That's what I'm telling you.
But why didn't you send a letter out?
Mr.
We
Walters,
have a legal,
there's a legal requirement.
I know that. But the areas that are being affected by this
You wanted more specific notice.
are so minute that you could have notified these people. A simple letter would say, we're thinking about rezoning the township. This could have happened 5 years ago. We're thinking about rezoning the township. We want to let you know. And then tonight, when you're sitting there and you're doing this, and all those people sitting here, you could have said, I sent you people a letter. I advertised this.
well, here's the problem with what you're saying. Say we would do something like that. Say we would send a letter out to a certain amount of people on Bigger Road. Then a year later, all the other people that didn't get the letter are going to come in and say, you broke the law, you didn't do it the way you're supposed to, and you didn't notify us. So if you miss one person, that person comes in and says, you didn't follow the law.
Did you not send letters out to every township resident during the election?
The election has nothing to do with township
You
business.
were able to send letters then. Why couldn't you send letters to all the residents now?
Didn't we send a postcard out to the residents? Didn't we do that?
I didn't receive no postcard.
Is our advertising and everything on here? It's all on the website. Every
It's on the website. You realize you have people here are computer illiterate.
Every mailing address in this town has got a postcard. Every address. Which website? Every one.
Like you said, the website was 4 months ago. I yield.
Yeah, we're gonna have 2 more hearings, and so there's plenty of time to make comments.
Hi, my name's Esther Dormer, and our property is 1357 Valley View, and we have invested a lot of money over the years in that property, and under the premise that it was R2, we had conversations with various parties that have been interested in looking at acquiring the property, and it would be a hardship for us and harm our negotiations if our zoning was changed. I understand that the plan is comprehensive, and I think there's a lot of benefits to it, but it seems that the lines are somewhat arbitrary in terms of changing the zoning, and I'm requesting that my zoning does not change from R2 to agriculture conservation, because it would hurt me in these current conversations. And our builders had called the office and got the zoning on 3 different occasions, and there was no mention that it was going to change, so we've been negotiating in good faith with the current zoning.
Could you tell us specifically what's changed from the old zoning to the new zoning?
Yes, I can. On the R2, it says Parks and Recreation and permitted conditional uses are multifamily dwellings. And it's a special exception on agricultural conservation. And country clubs are allowed in R2, and they are not permitted principal uses in agricultural conservation.
Was that it, the country club?
It was country club, parks and recreation, and under special conditional uses, you had planned residential development, and you don't have that in, you don't have any of the conditional uses in agricultural conservation.
Parks and recreation is a permitted use in the new district. That's permitted.
Okay, then, the country club?
I think the only real difference in from the old zoning district was planned residential development.
Right.
And there is a problem with the existing ordinance. In the RA zoning district, it says that the RA zoning district is for low-density residential development. But then in the conditional use section, it provides for planned residential development. That's kind of like a contradiction of what that district was. So that's one of the reasons that the districts were more separated, so that the ag conservation district is low residential, and I think it was the R1 Mr. Grossman, the R1?
Yeah, R1A and R1B. And just to respond, if that's the case, and it's like the gentleman that first spoke, generally speaking, those type of things would probably be better affected by map changes rather than changing the text of the districts.
Yeah, that's all we're asking for.
Yeah, because you're listing the use, you don't want to change the uses in one of the districts. What you're asking for is, in simple terms,
That's
you would
exactly
rather
right.
your
Yeah,
property be
we've
zoned
been- That's
residential.
correct, because we've been in negotiations with people for a long period of time and have invested a considerable amount of money in those negotiations, and for you to change it last minute would cause a financial hardship for us.
So it's the planned residential development that's?
Well, we have more than one party we're talking to, so we just request to have the existing zoning stay the same for our property.
So,
Thank you. My name is Carl Spadaro. I'm the general manager for Max Environmental Technologies, 200 Max Drive, Baltimore, PA. Max Environmental Technologies has owned property in Robinson Township for several years. Portions of that property were proposed for development by Max in the late 1980s. Max intends to develop portions of its property in Robinson Township at some point in the future, and thus opposes the adoption of any ordinance or change in zoning laws, regulations, designations, or requirements that would negatively or adversely impact Max's ability to develop its property. Max respectfully requests that the Board of Supervisors allow for owners of property in the township and other interested parties additional time to thoroughly review the proposed ordinances that are the subject of tonight's public meeting and hearing, so as to provide comments to the board as necessary. Thank you.
could you identify where the property is and where it's currently zoned?
It's north of Schaefer Road. It would be in the southwestern portion of the township. And I'm not sure currently what it is zoned as. We understood that property, since it's been owned by Max since the 1980s, would have been grandfathered in before the first zoning ordinance was effective. It looks like from the proposed zoning map that it might be designated as special conservation or residential.
Your zoning's not changing at all?
It's not?
No. There's no change. It's currently zoned residential agricultural, and it would be rural residential. There's no change.
There's no change? Okay, thank you.
Sean Gallagher, Canninger, Soul and Rooney on behalf of Range Resources. My question is with respect to the creation of the oil.
I can't hear you.
We're going to have a hearing just for that.
But this is about the map.
We're going to have a hearing for that.
I thought this was the hearing on the map.
No, this is the zoning ordinance. We haven't
There's
even done the map yet.
So we're going to be talking about the overlay district and then the oil and gas requirements?
Yes.
All right.
Wait, I think I'm on the wrong hearing. Am I right?
But this is only the zoning ordinance. We're going to do the zoning map, and we're going to do the oil and gas overlay district.
Tim Jones. I'd like to read a statement, but I also want to comment on the zoning and the establishment of your zoning district. You've indicated that apparently drilling could be anywhere, but what concerns me is that if you look at Section 201, under Article 2, Section 201, for each district, a table of permitted and conditional uses is established. Permitted use and conditional uses for each district is shown in the following tables, and are considered principal uses unless clearly noted. No use is permitted in a district unless specifically permitted. So that causes me some pause with that. Uses
Mr.
not
Jones, speak up so the court reporter can hear you.
Stand up, please. Yeah.
Okay. If you would look at section, under Article 2, Section 201.2 and also 201.3, you would look that you have established each district, whether it's agricultural, conservation, or what have you. You have a table for each of these districts, and the table outlines permitted and conditional uses is established. If you don't have it, that use is not there, then you are not allowed to have that activity. So Under 201.3, uses that are not specifically listed as a permitted use, conditional use, or use by special exception in any zoning district shall be permitted as a special exception in the industrial district pursuant to the procedures and requirements of the article. So that seems to contradict your earlier statement that with the new zoning that drilling would occur at any part of the township. So, but that's not what I wanted to comment on. I want to read something. While I disagree with many provisions of your proposed zoning ordinance, I would like to specifically address Article 4, Section 401, regarding the subdivision of large parcels of land. In Section 401C4, you write, regardless of size, no parcel or lot subsequently divided from its parent tract shall qualify for additional lots pursuant to this section. All subsequent owners of parcels of land subdivided from a parent tract shall be bound by the actions of the previous owners of that parent tract. Now, these proposed ordinances are not straightforward and complicate and limit activities and uses of the landowner and actually take away farmers and private property owners' rights. The Township Comprehensive Plan even acknowledges the need for less complicated ordinances. Our township supervisors are disconnected from the wishes of the majority of township residents. Results of the May primary and subsequent election overwhelmingly confirmed this fact. The results were a clear message that the voters/residents did not approve of the board's recent behavior or activities. The board does not know what's best for its residents. This is still America, and the township supervisors must not be permitted to have this much power over our private property. The supervisors should familiarize themselves with the wishes and will of the people. For example, how can the board propose ordinances impacting farmers when they have no agricultural background and are not acquainted with the needs of this agricultural community, which represents 85% of Robinson Township? If the rezoning and proposed ordinances are enacted as written, our descendants, that'd be my son, my grandchildren, would be prohibited from further subdivision. Therefore, these ordinances must not be approved. This is an infringement on our and our descendants' right as private property owners. And I'd like to